Back to Trees and Lines at Trees and Utilities. Jason Grossman, our first podcast guest of this year's conference, a familiar face. Jason is manager of Vegetation Management for Liberty Utilities. So thanks, man, for making time.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, of course.
Returning guest.
Yeah, thank you. No, this is we're excited to do this again this year, and wanted to kind of jump right in. I've had the pleasure of getting to know you a little bit more, on the back of last year's conference, and something I wanted to talk about with you that blew me away when we had sat down and talked a little bit of the details was how effective you and your group have been in terms of managing the cost per mile and getting it down to a level. I just remember when you shared the number, and we don't have to get into the number here, but Adam, one of my colleagues' eyes rolled in the back of his head. So you good, congratulations on accomplishing that. But
thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to, without getting into a specific number, wanted to hear sort of the method to the madness, how you kind of think about it and how you drive to such an effective solution.
I think one of the big components of integrated vegetation management is that you use multiple different pieces, and there's a lot of different things we do to make that a success. A lot of it drives from just basic stem reduction. We were very aggressive with herbicides early on in my career. We had a lot of problems, a lot of outages on transmission from brush, and we ended up spraying a lot of tall brush. And sometimes that's a bit of a concern, especially with recent fire hazards and everything else. But we had a plan for going back and cleaning that up with machines, and that reduced we got really good biological control with spraying it first and then machining it out. And I think the industry norm is kind of, let's mow it out, let's make it look kind of pretty, and then we can come through and spray it when it's not such an eyesore. And we didn't really have that kind of concern. And I know talking with some other colleagues too, when they came out and saw what we were doing, they were kind of nervous, but it's worked very well. We live in a good part of the country where people are very receptive to that. And we actually get complaints about us not spraying people's fence rows more than we do about actually spraying them. So,
and I don't know if you can share this, but so clearly spraying is a key part of the strategy.
Herbicide is part of it, yes. I said, there's multiple different pieces. When we started out, we had a 44% removal rate on our conventional work. That's dwindled down to below 20 recently, but it's just because there's not a lot of targets there anymore, and the percentages are very low. So we're basically just maintaining the sides, a handful of trees underneath the power lines, and then brush.
So basically, you're done. You can retire now. There's nothing left to do.
It's good to have that spray work behind you. I'm sure that was not an easy process to get started.
That was my predecessor, and he did a really good job about selling that. And we just went through, at that time I was a planner, and we pushed the limits on that a lot. Since then, we've partnered with another firm, and we've retrograded a Kershaw trimmer with a tank and plumbed it up to the nozzle, or plumbed the nozzle at the end. And we're doing a lot of side trimming on transmission, which is also seeing a great reduction in costs, about 6 cents per foot when you put it just heads up with a regular Kershaw, and then you don't have the cost of mowing behind to come and clean it up. So it comes out to be almost half the cost of 6 cents per foot cheaper with the giraffes. So a lot of innovation goes into it, and a lot of thinking outside of the box, and that's a lot of herbicides. We also do a lot of cool stuff with TGR as well. We treat ahead of the tree crews to make sure that we're getting that product up at the pruning point when it's pruned, instead of waiting that 60 days and hoping the translocation moves it up into the tree and regulates that growth. So thinking outside of the box has been a big component for maintaining a productive budget and maintaining kind of a flat line there.
Sounds like your program constantly evolving. You're modifying.
So we do it, we assess it, we evaluate, we adjust, and then we go back and do it again. And it's a constant cycle of checking to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing and making sure that it's working the way we want it to work.
That's great. So at this stage, utilization of technologies, et cetera, what's sort of the next phase for you in the improvement of the program? I mean, obviously you've figured out a lot of the math, but what's on the wish list? What's on the to-do list?
Drones with laser beams that trim the trees by themselves.
Nice, I like it.
I've already given it some thought, and it's a bit of a conspiracy theory, but
Grossman Incorporated.
Right.
Yeah.
If you can triangulate multiple lower strength laser beams, you can trim the tree at a high intensity at that pruning point. It takes a lot of precision, and it's a pipe dream. It's a ways down the road, but
there was research on that in the 80s.
Yeah.
Laser trimming.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's those things change and those ideas come back around and they get reevaluated, and it may not be the right time, but eventually it's going to be.
I am interested in, we've touched on this a little bit in the past, but you're obviously somebody that can push the limits, think about things outside the box. You obviously, in order for that to all work and come together, you got to be inside an organization that helps foster that or kind of meets you along the way in a partnership format. Talk a little bit about Liberty's culture in that regard, and what it's like to kind of take some of these ideas and put them into practice.
Well, you absolutely have to have that support from leadership, and that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. But for us, we've been very lucky in having that leadership that's perceptive to new ideas and open to change and doing things differently. And one of my catchphrases, my guys will probably make fun of me for saying on this, but we can try something new, and if it doesn't work, we go back to doing it the way we used to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big selling points that I can put up to my management and say, hey, this is something that we need. This is how we think we can do it. We can leverage it, and we can save a little bit this way. It's going to help us out, and we can get through this problem. And they're very receptive to that and open to it. And I think it helps to kind of illustrate your successes too. When you do have a success, it's good to let them know, but also your failures as well. Your failures are just as important as the successes in helping you learn and get that feedback to make sure that you don't make the same mistake twice.
Often you learn more from the failures, but not too many people are willing to talk about them.
Right. Well, it's a little embarrassing sometimes especially if you fail big time, but we've done several things, and we've tried it this way and it didn't work this time, and something changed in our program, and then we've tried it again, and it worked for a little while and then it didn't, and then I think maybe 6 years down the road or something we'll try it again, and it might work perfectly at that point.
Yeah.
But it's a constant ebb and flow of trying new things and adjusting.
I was talking to some of the UA leadership, and they told me that the record numbers here this year, for you attending this event, what are some of the things that you're on the lookout for? Any specific types of technologies, or just taking a poke around? Like what's on your list of things?
I think it's always great to see new things. There's new ideas. There's a lot of people out here with interesting stuff, crazy ideas like drones with laser beams, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But for me, I see a lot of these pieces, and maybe they're not whole, but down the road, I have a need for something, and I can say, satellite imagery, and we need change detection, we need infrared health. A lot of this stuff is driven from agriculture and military science, and I think if you kind of keep your finger on a lot of that keep your finger on a lot of that technology that's coming out, you can figure out a way to adapt it to what we do.
Yep.
What's your remote sensing strategy here?
Well, we've been working with Live.EO, and they've done, for us, we're on a mandated cycle, so we have to go look at all the vegetation. We've done a good job of GPSing all of our trees. Currently, we're seeing emerald ash borer infiltrate our system, and that's one of the big concerns for me. We just got a bunch of ash trees, especially in our Kansas and Oklahoma service territories. We've done a good job inventorying that on the distribution, but the transmission has always been machines and herbicide, and it's not taken into account species. So for us, that satellite imagery to be able to detect the ash species, the pockets of ash on our system on the transmission, and then also take that change in health to say, oh crap, it's starting to hit up here, or it's moving down here, and we can kind of monitor that trend over time and focus our efforts where we need to put it.
I got to ask this question because I just saw this in the Wall Street Journal. How if you guys have heard this, the Japanese knotwood? Have you heard about this? Basically, I'll call it like an epidemic, pandemic. It's like destroying, it grows like 3 feet a week. It's like ruining foundations. I know it's a lower sort of level sort of vegetation, but new species that come in, right? Things that are kind of popping up. Like, how much do you track a lot of that stuff, and in what capacity are you tracking, new vegetation that may be popping up that you've got to study? Like, where is your sort of research part of the side of your business?
I think it comes from our foresters, to be honest with you.
They're the ones kind of keeping an eye out on all that stuff. Like, do you guys have a dedicated staff also, kind of studying species and
no, we kind of are jacks of all trades and masters of none, but we dabble in a little bit of everything. And I don't think we've got Japanese knotweed on our property yet, but we've got kudzu, and that's another one that's more of a southern problem, but it's creeping up, and it's on the southern tip of our system, and we're starting to see it come a little bit further north, and it's one of those things we just have to keep adjusting and adapting to manage it. And we had a really good spray program several years ago and got part of it knocked out on one of our lines, and it just keeps coming back. So it's one of those constantly evolving strategies, and we just have to increase our frequency of some patrols. I remember driving down this one road where that kudzu was, and it grows about a foot a day sometimes. But I drove down it, and 3 weeks later, I came back, and it was all the way across the road. There was literally just an 8-foot swath where people had been driving through to keep it back. It can go up those poles real quick, and it's constant monitoring and vigilance on it.
Yeah, kudzu's one of those that just won't go away.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody has a answer to the problem other than, like you say, just be vigilant.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and it spreads by so many different means. It's a really optimal plant for growing in our climate, and not a lot of natural predators yet for it. So
yeah, lots of things going on in the news. You know, it was a pretty aggressive storm season. I lived through some of it myself in Houston.
Yeah.
You know, so I got a chance to really appreciate.
You got one coming in towards you right
community.
now. Yeah.
You know, what's keeping you up at night right now in terms of like the system, you know, events, tornadoes, storms? Like, you know, is it just you're staying the course, you know, hardening, doing the things that you guys are doing? Are you watching what's happening in your adjacent markets? Is that causing you to respond and react differently in terms of your engagement with PUCs, with your own leadership?
Primarily for us, the weather events are ice and tornadoes. Don't worry too much about them. Tornadoes just kind of come when they come. Hurricanes are a little different. You can see them coming. You can get a little bit prepared for them in a short amount of time. But ice is another one. It just kind of happens, and you do your best to manage it for when it does happen. You mitigate the risks. But, you know, I used to kind of make fun of California for all the wildfire stuff, and but that's coming our way too. And you've seen it now in Hawaii. Down in Texas is having some wildfires, and you know, we're probably just a couple bad summers away from having that issue in Missouri as well. So
I think I saw on your Facebook, your picture was of a wildfire, wasn't it?
That was a little prescribed burning. So that was one of the jabs I used to do was, you guys are worried about fire. We're setting our right-of-ways on fire and burning them off. So that's part of a management plan too. Reducing fuel load and other stuff. We use it kind of experimentally in few selected locations to promote pollinator habitat and really get that biological control established on our right-of-ways.
Is your system predominantly rural? You're in Joplin, is that right?
Right. Joplin's our main account town. It's about a 60-40 split. So we have 40% urban and what we designate as rural 60%. So it's a lot. It's a very agricultural community or region. We are kind of splitting the prairie and the Ozark Plateau, right north, south, east, west on our system there.
Yeah. Beautiful country. You know, a pretty interesting topography. But as always, my friend, it was thank you for making time. Pleasure seeing you today, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Yeah, good seeing you, Jason.
That's it for this episode of Trees and Lines, brought to you by Iapetus Holdings. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. If you have any questions or comments on any of our episodes or ideas for topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at treesandlines@iapetusllc.com. We'll chat with you soon.